Paycheck won Ben Affleck a Razzie Award and has been disowned by everyone who worked on it. But is it any good? Let's talk about Paycheck. So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we're talking about the 2003 science fiction action movie Paycheck. I think I saw it randomly when it came out. I've seen it on a number of occasions since then, and I've always kind of sort of enjoyed it. But I think what's interesting about this one is that it is a movie that is really reviled by a lot of people. But on the other hand, there's a bunch of people who kind of enjoy it in a guilty pleasure kind of way. So the movie itself is about this engineer who works for a major company. And the deal is that he reverse engineers products from the competition. And at the end of the project, when he has successfully reverse engineered it, he undergoes this experimental treatment that erases all of his memories of everything he did while he worked on this project. He basically takes one last big paycheck, right, where he trades 3 years of his life for a life-altering amount of money. And then when he wakes up on the other end and expects this massive payday, he is told that he forfeited his payment and instead has an envelope full of random stuff. And then the plot kind of unfolds from there. So you watched this for the first time, right?
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway from Paycheck?
Overall, it's a very good idea. People say that this was a low budget film. I didn't see that. I don't know. I didn't see that. I think like the things I was seeing looks pretty cool. And if it was a low budget, then they definitely made use of that budget. I liked the effects. I liked how they made use of the whole like seeing one's memory in the script. Like, you know what I'm saying? Seeing one's memory. Like I said, the choreography, like, especially when it comes to the fight scenes and then just like the locations that they were in, it seemed pretty high budget to me. And it seemed like they definitely made use of their money and they put the money in the right places. So I don't agree with it being low budget. I'm a bit confused why this film. Maybe people didn't like this film because they thought the idea was stupid. That's the only thing that comes to mind because I thought the idea was pretty cool. Not even pretty cool. I thought it was cool. I liked it, and I'm a bit confused. I'm gonna check to see when the reviews were released because if they hated this one, then how the hell did people love Severance? Now I haven't finished watching Severance. I think I just came up to like episode 1 or episode 2. I don't know how it comes to an end. However, Severance idea is pretty much paychecks. So.
I mean, a lot comes down to execution, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a very simple idea about like this whole idea of you're trading your life away for a paycheck, right? Which is what all of us do, right? All of us don't have control over how we spend the bulk of our waking hours, right? And this kind of takes that to an extreme. I've not seen it called cheap anywhere. Like, this had a budget of 60 million in 2003, and I think it looks kind of like how most mid-budget sci-fi action movies from 2003 look. It doesn't strike me as especially good or especially bad. There's the big effects here are obviously the machine itself, which turns out to be a time machine that lets you watch into the future. So that's the second big sci-fi idea, right? The first one being you're trading away your life for a paycheck. The second idea being, what if you could tell the future? So that's what one big side of where the budget went, and the other went into the numerous chases and action sequences in this movie, right? As Jennings and Rachel are being hunted by the company and by the government. I think there's like 3 different segments to the movie, right? The first one is it's kind of the opening, which we're kind of seeing the day-to-day for Jennings, where he's taking these jobs and he's living a good life, but he basically disappears for years at a time, right? To do these projects, and then he comes home and basically has to catch up, but he's basically living a good life, right? Like, this is equivalent of somebody who spends like 10 years just devoting their lives to their entire job, and then in their 30s begins living, right? Like when they've made it. And then the second part is where he takes the job, finishes the job, and finds out that he has forfeited his paycheck and has just this envelope of random junk that he's left for himself. And then the third part is the action movie, where it's one big chase, right? Where the government and the company are after him, and he's trying to destroy the machine before they get to him, right? So I think there's like those are 3 very different movies and 3 very different stories. So do you think they fit together? And did you what was your reaction watching it?
I thought it was good because It added to kind of like the progression of the film, and it made it more fun to watch. I think if it was just one surface level in terms of like one idea, it could have been just like a mystery film, right? Like a mystery type of drama film without the action, cool. But I think that made it like the whole like the action sequence, definitely like the action sequence. That was pretty much, even though you saw action throughout. However, like you could tell like the ending was like the big like finale when it comes to action. That was definitely like I said, it just made it more fun. It made it more thrilling. So I think if for the type of film that it was and it was intentionally trying to be, and in terms of like the idea, because the idea is so like it's borderline cuckoo. So I think it's relevant. Like you need different layers of a story for an idea like that, because an idea like that shouldn't be taken seriously. And in order for an idea like that not to be taken seriously, you need elements such as the action scenes, for example, to kind of like just reinforce the idea that this, even though this idea is cuckoo, it's a cuckoo idea that can be a good film, that should be a good film, and I believe it is a good film. So I'm just kind of still stuck on people not liking it. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to the reaction to it, but just the movie itself. Um, like I'm really on board with this whole idea of what if you build a machine that lets you watch into the future and you could see not only your own future but kind of the world's future.
Same.
And what if it's terrible? Like what if you see your own death, and what if you see the end of the world, right? We later on in the movie kind of especially see this kind of reflection by Jennings on every time, like he spent months probably looking, like using this machine and looking at different futures and trying to figure out how to operate the machine and how to interpret what he's seeing. And it turns out that the machine by itself is what destroys the world, right? Because every time they get warning of some disaster, their cure is worse than the disease, right? So they try to quarantine the people who are causing a plague, and that causes the plague. They try to preempt a war, and that escalates the conflict, right? So this whole idea of simply the machine having been invented is what's destroying the world. And that is basically why he comes to the conclusion that this cannot, like, there is no safe way to use this. You have to destroy it, and obviously the company is not going to let him, so he has to go rogue, right?
So this movie, I think is, I don't know why I'm so confused, but now now actually thinking about it, okay, everything makes sense now. So it made sense because he was still living. Now everything else makes sense. So the events make sense. So he was obviously still living. Obviously, while the time that he was living in those 3 years, he obviously figured out like, oh crap, like we're killing it, like we're killing ourselves.
So he builds the machine, and he starts using it, and as he's using it, he sees what his future and the world's future is.
Yeah. That will make sense. Obviously, he ends up helping himself out when obviously his memories wiped out, just giving himself clues and etc. to kind of like he built the machine. Because I know they said that he built the machine, but the machine was flipping now, Daniel. Like this movie has kind of lost me from. So okay.
Yeah, something just occurred to me that might be a plot hole. I'm not sure. Which is he doesn't invent things.
He doesn't invent it.
He reverse engineers it. That means somebody else has built the machine, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if the movie says where they got this from and why somebody else isn't also building the machine. I feel like there's a line that explains this, but I can't think of it right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Isn't this the researcher who is killed? There's this whole thing where the FBI becomes aware of him because the researcher who invents the original time machine dies, right? He's killed. He falls out of a window, and the relevant patents are made under Jennings's name, which is probably the plot hole, because it should be under the company's name, should be under his personal name, right? Especially since he's supposed to be this like disposable and undeniable asset. That's the whole idea with the mind wipe technology. I think the plot hole is that the company, like, he should not be, like, his name should not be on the patent.
Yeah.
But right, so somebody invents the time machine. The company realizes this, reverse engineers this laser, and then kills the original inventor so that they can claim they invented it. But the patent gets registered under Jennings's name, which is not supposed to happen. So I think that's the plot hole. But that's basically how that goes.
So Jennings is about terrible character names. Jennings is the main character, right? So that's Ben Affleck.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So when they all kept on saying, like, when he was saying, oh, he's responsible for building it, I thought he meant as in, like, because he'd done the, like, free experiment that obviously his friends told him not to do, and obviously his girlfriend at the time told him not to do. I assumed he meant as in, like, he gave birth to it because he showed like the people actually behind the creation of it, as in like the capabilities of it, which obviously led to the future events. That's what I thought they meant. But then when he kept on saying, but he kept on like saying that this was mine, I made it, I need to take responsibility, etc. I was like, wait, hold on, like, you're an inventor now. Like I know that you reversed.
Well, he made it work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm saying. So like, I know he gave birth to obviously the machine, whatever it is. However, I didn't. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't mentioned or wasn't shown that you actually made it. So besides that, wait, what was your original point? Because I know we kind of drifted off to the whole plot hole.
So this whole story of him sending himself these clues, I think that's really the fun part of this movie, right?
Yeah.
Like the big mystery of you did something impossible, right? Which is you walked away from a $90 million paycheck and you just sent yourself a bunch of junk, and you kind of have to kind of trust that you did this for a reason, but you can't remember it. Now you have to kind of retrace your steps, right? Yeah. So you're basically trusting in yourself at that point. I think that is really the strong point of the movie, right? Yeah. At this point, we've gotten to know Jennings, we've gotten to know like his lifestyle and what kind of person he is and what he wants, and then we are. I think that's established very well in the first 20 minutes or so, and then we kind of pull out the rug from under that because we know what he should be doing, and then we are told that he's done something that's completely at odds with that, and I think that is something where you need a certain amount of trust on the part of the audience, right? Where the movie has to have convinced you that you've got a point, right? That you're working towards something and it's going to make sense. And I think that is really the important part in a story like this, where this has to be a movie that hangs together and it has to make sense in hindsight, but it still has to be an engaging mystery as you're watching it.
Yeah.
I think the movie delivers on that. And I think that is why I still have an overall positive impression of it, and we'll get to the negatives in a minute. But I think what this movie really does well is it introduces me to Jennings, it convinces me of what kind of person he is, and then it confronts me with this impossible decision, right? That he did something so out of character, that's the mystery. And then Jennings himself has to retrace his own steps to kind of figure out why he did this. And because we're in his head the entire time and we're finding out together with him, I think that is what makes it compelling. And I think the pieces generally work. There's a couple where it's like it's movie nonsense, like this whole thing where he sets up a trap or he sabotages the machine by kind of strapping a bullet to the liquid nitrogen tanks. That just does not work this way. Like it's just nonsense. And they could have come up with something else. But up until that point, every piece in the envelope kind of makes sense, right? He knows what he gets his attention by figuring out what the winning lotto numbers are going to be a couple of days from now. And that is how he gets his attention, because there's no way anybody could have predicted that. And that puts him on kind of the track for, this is about time travel, right? This is about the future. Then there's this whole thing about the cigarettes and like these glasses that are exactly what he needs to escape FBI custody, right? And every step of the way, I think the different pieces are pretty much what he needs to be. I think a few of them are a bit reaching, but overall, it kind of makes sense, right? Where once he trusts his former self to have left him with clues that mean something, and he only needs to figure it out once he's on that path, it pretty much makes sense. And then there's like one or two where it's maybe, you could have come up with something better. But I think that entire scavenger hunt sequence, I think, really makes the movie and is really the fun part of the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that is how like a science fiction element in a story has to work, where it has to enable the story you want to tell, but it has to be thought through in a way where you kind of, like, the trust of the audience is earned and justified. You cannot simply hand wave it. You cannot simply say, oh, this is magic. Anything, we can do anything. No, this has to be like consistent, and we have to kind of trust that it all makes sense in the end. And I think broadly it does, right? Like for the most part, the clues he leaves himself make sense, and the way he figures it out mostly makes sense. And I think that is really what carries the movie for me.
I do think he already trusted himself. Well, maybe you're just, I get what you mean in terms of trust himself. I think I just took that literal.
It could be a setup, right? He does not remember what he did during the project, and so maybe he got scammed out of his paycheck, and he has no way of refuting that because he's not supposed to. It's not supposed to be transparent, right?
Yeah. First watching, I didn't necessarily I didn't get that at first. I didn't I always thought that he trusts himself. He was just trying to figure out why he did what he did, because he knows himself. So that's why when you said trust himself, I was like, wait, like at first I thought you couldn't be literal, but you actually mean we're actually literal. So I was like, okay, so I disagree. I just kind of saw it in a different outlook. I just said, because I already just in general, even his reaction, even the fact that he took the conversation that he had with his friend that betrayed him, you could tell money was money was, a big thing for him. For most, but it was definitely a big thing for him, because when they were having that conversation, was like, oh, it's 3 years of your life. And it didn't really take much persuading, because at first he was a bit reluctant, but then obviously the guy must have said like 2 words, and that didn't take much persuading at all. So yeah, I could tell already that, okay, this character, he's in it for the money. You know what I'm saying? He really loves money. So then,
It absolutely is, yeah.
exactly. So then afterwards, so that's why watching it, I was like, I didn't really see it as a thing where he was trying to build up, like he was trying to trust himself. Just like I said, I just saw it as a thing where he was trying to figure out why he would do that if he's this type of way in terms of like a money man. So yeah, that's just how I saw it. But I get what you mean.
And that's why he knows that's the only thing that will get his attention.
Uh-huh.
Forfeiting that paycheck, which is the only thing he ever cares about. Like, something really must be up if he walked away from that voluntarily, right?
Yeah.
And so that is what gets his attention in the first place. And for a while, he's sure there's been a mistake and whatever, but he keeps being told, no, you actually did this, and here's your signature, and here's the paper trail and all of that, right? Yeah. Which, there's not supposed to be a paper trail, but whatever, fine. But we're convinced that he's not being screwed over by anybody in the company. He actually did this to himself. And now the question is why?
Question. In terms of the appointments, when I say appointment, as in like when he's actually, getting his mind wiped, when he's actually doing the whole, I don't know what you would call it, the whole process of that experiment, when he's actually doing the experiment, is it just one appointment that he has, or was there different appointments that he had during the 3 years? If so, if it was one appointment, then I think that might be a plot hole, but
there's two. The first one sets the marker, and then the second one wipes everything since the marker.
Okay, no.
So at the start of the project, they set this is the stop mark. And then he does his project, and when the project is complete, they wipe everything during the project. So that's not a plot hole.
Okay, but what I was going to say was the plot hole. I thought it was a plot hole because when Rachel said to him, I told you should have never done it, I'm like, so when was this then? Because if there was only technically, she could have said, she didn't say it before, because we didn't see her say it before. So she said during the 3 years that they were together. Why would she say that if he already did the experiment? That's what doesn't make sense to me, because she met him when he did the experiment. Or she should have known.
They both live on this compound.
Yeah.
Right? There's this company compound, and they are both doing research for the company. And so they get together during those 3 years with the expectation that they will never see each other again afterwards. But then during the project, he realizes what's going on, and so he kind of sets it up in such a way where she can help him with his mission because she's on the inside.
Okay. So she was telling him not to get his mind wiped. So she was telling him not to go to the second appointment, pretty much.
I think that part is also a bit strange, because there's no way he can just not do that.
That's what I'm trying to say. There's no way he could have done that. So that's what I was like, okay, I think they should have gotten into that a bit more. Like, were they like kind of like creating a plan for him to not go to the second appointment? That's what I thought. When she said that, I thought there was going to be like, I thought that was a mystery, number one, and secondly, I thought, okay, that's another mystery that, a subplot which we're going to end up seeing. But that was just, I think that was just like a loose comment that was just put out there because she was emotional in that time.
I don't remember that line exactly. I'm not sure what exactly she said not to do. I think it was about him going through with his plan to double cross the company.
Okay.
Because that's dangerous. I think she also didn't know when he was going to get this, like, his mind wiped, because when the company guy goes to her to see if he's been talking to her, if Jennings has been talking to her, she's surprised that he's left the company. She didn't know when exactly this would happen, and she also didn't know what exactly his plan was, because when he leaves this message on her bathroom mirror, she's not exactly surprised that he did this, but she didn't expect it that in that moment. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of questionable details in this plot, right, where it's not entirely clear if it all makes sense, and maybe if you really put it under a microscope, maybe it doesn't.
I don't think it deserves to be put under a microscope, because I think they've done enough already. Whereas, we can our critiques that we could just kind of push them under the rug just a bit. Because, like I said, the film is actually a good film, and it gets you thinking. Those are just little minor details, which I think they could have kind of like, brushed up on a bit. But overall, yeah, for me personally.
Yeah, I do want it to make sense, right? Like this should all line up in the end, and there's no excuse for it not to, I think. Like you can polish a script to the point where it all hangs together, right? Something like Back to the Future famously, like that kind of all lines up and things like that, right? So it is like time travel notoriously is difficult to keep track of, but if you have one 2 hour movie or 90-minute movie, this is just under 2 hours. I think it should absolutely be possible to keep it free of contradictions. I think there's like little details where maybe it doesn't quite make sense. But broadly, we've been talking about the half that really makes the movie shine, right? Which is Jennings realizing that he's forfeited his pay and his scavenger hunt to figure out what the clues mean. And then somewhere in the second half, that's where the movie kind of goes off the rails for me. Because at that point, it just becomes generic action schlock, right? Where it's just car chases and gunfights. He behaves a little bit like an engineer. Like there's a couple of scenes where it makes use of his skill set, right? And his knowledge of this technology and stuff like that. And also Rachel's background, like in those greenhouses, and she knows how to use that robot in the lab and stuff like that, right? But at some point, it kind of just turns into a big chase. And that is one of my big bugbears with like science fiction movies, where there are almost no it's like science fiction movies that kind of resist this temptation of turning into generic action in the second half. The idea being like we can start our movie with the big idea and the talking, but at some point somebody has to run and something has to explode. Otherwise, audiences will not like it. There's probably something to this. Like if you just made like just a purely talky science fiction movie, it's gonna be something like Ex Machina, or I'm blanking on one right now. There's one where a bunch of engineers build a time machine and the entire thing is just them being driven insane by the causality. I'd have to look up the name afterwards, but like there's a couple that don't turn into just outright action, but almost all of them do. One example that I've got is The Island, which starts off as this dystopian science fiction where people live on this island and there's a lottery for people to go to paradise, and then there's a sinister secret, and then in the second half it's just people running and things exploding and people shooting guns. And like this is like that, right? Like it's very much the most generic action you've ever seen. The company doesn't behave like a company. The government kind of is kind of pretty generic, like every other evil government is after you kind of movie you've ever seen. And it just stops being the same kind of movie, I thought. And that is the part I think that is really dragging down the movie, and that prevents the movie from doing anything interesting in the second half. And that is kind of my big bugbear with this one.
Because I think for me, I do see where you're coming from, but for me, the way that the antagonist threat was maintained in the third act with the action scene, like I said before, it kept it more exciting and more fun to watch. I think that's the like key word is fun. Yeah, you can still make a fun if you kind of like keep the structure of how you did like the same structure that you did in like Act 1 and Act 2. However, I'm not mad at them kind of like drifting away to like the whole action schlock, as you would say. For me, like this.
The problem is it's generic. It doesn't have much to do. Like yes, he's trying to break into the lab, and they're trying to stop him, right? In that sense, it still has something to do with the first half, but it's not the same kind of movie, right? The first one is kind of a mystery, and it's about characters trying to outsmart each other, and notably the main character trying to outsmart himself. And I think that is what gets your attention. Like if you're into this movie at all, that's how they get you. And then afterwards, it's just chases.
I think they kind of give you hints that it's going to end up like that, because from the beginning, Act 1, where he's training, right, with the whole. Yeah. So I think when I saw that scene, because in the beginning I didn't think it was going to be like that. So when I saw him training, I thought, oh, that's a bit random. Honestly, when I first watched it, I thought that's a bit random, because it went from that to him being like a whole ninja. So I was like, okay. But then obviously throughout, I was like, oh, okay. So his skills were actually they're actually put to use.
That's the scene where he trained, like after his first job, he trains with his handler.
Yeah.
Like, or his friend, and he's using like that staff fighting technique, right, as a workout. And then in the end, he picks up, he defeats the bad guys using that martial art, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's set up and payoff, and it's nice that they did this. But I'm just saying it didn't have to be this way. The entire thing could have been a mind game. The entire thing could have been a puzzle.
I don't disagree with that. It could have, and I think I would have enjoyed it the same. I just said, alternatively, which was the action scenes, I wasn't mad at that either. It was still fun, and it made sense because obviously for what they showed in Act 1. However, I wouldn't have been mad at what you're going to continue saying now. By the way, I wouldn't have been mad if it turned out that way in terms of just a continuous build-up of mystery and trying to figure out, his clues, his own.
Yeah. So this famously has like a terrible reputation. Rotten Tomatoes, it is 26%. Audience is 45. And Ben Affleck got a Razzie Award for this. He accepted it and then broke the award and then sold that on eBay. I don't remember what he did with it, with the money. And John Woo, the director, basically said, yeah, this is not what I wanted it to be, but the studio made me make this movie, essentially. This is like notoriously lambasted as being a terrible movie. And I think it's more of a mix. And I think like it's not the greatest movie of this kind, right? But it's okay, especially the first half, where it's very focused on Jennings and it's very focused on what he does and why he does it. I don't know. It's like I don't really see the criticism. I think it's quite enjoyable. Where it all falls apart is in the last third or so, and that's why I dislike the action sequences so much. It's because it's just here's some generic action. Isn't that exciting? And no, it's kind of not. I kind of signed up for something else, and I think that is kind of the big criticism I think you can levy at this movie, is that it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it kind of falls apart in the end. It doesn't live up to its potential at all when it really had a pretty strong start, I think. Like there's some like slightly hokey performances here and there, but it's like a mid-budget early 2000s sci-fi movie. They kind of were like this in many cases. And to me, the thing is, does this have an interesting idea? And does it do something with this idea? And the answer is yes, at least initially. Like when the initial scavenger hunt starts and it becomes clear that he's left all these different clues that ensure his survival, it works. I think it makes sense broadly. Like there's little details here and there where you can say, okay, maybe this could have been better, but you can pretty much say that about every movie. But what actually the parts that need to work really need to work. It's just that they throw it away 2/3 of the way through the movie.
What were they saying though? Why do you know like the recurring criticism that was being said about this film? Because I'm trying to understand it. Was it like they didn't like the idea, or they just said in general it just wasn't for me?
Just that it's bad.
Okay.
Like the acting is bad, the writing is bad, the production values are bad, and I don't quite agree with that. I think when it comes to Ben Affleck kind of selling us on this guy, I think that works. I think we know who he is. I think we know why he does what he does. Rachel, is maybe a little bit less interesting, but we also kind of see like who she is. Yeah. Like it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And to me, like I have this idea of that a movie basically needs to sell you on one thing. It basically needs to give you something you can latch onto. And that can be anything. It can be character, it can be story, it can be world building, it can be action, it can be music, it can be aesthetics. As long as it gives you something that can carry the movie, it's okay. The rest becomes less important. It still can ruin the movie, but it can excuse. Like my favorite example of this is Star Wars and dialogue. It's got some really terrible dialogue in the original trilogy. But if you are on board with the story and the world and the characters, like the individual dialogue is not as important. And similar here, I kind of like Jennings is kind of like not the most interesting character, but I can understand what he does and why he does it. I kind of like, and I've been sold that the puzzle works, right? That if I stick with this, the pieces will all come together, and for the most part they do. And so for that reason, the movie holds up for me. It's just like I kind of start zoning out, in the 20-25 minutes where they're just running and chasing, like there's car chases and whatever. At that point, I say, okay, fine. Like there's no, like this is just filler. There's no story here. There's no character here. We're not advancing the thing that the original movie sold us on. And then we come back to that in the very end, a little bit, and that's fine. Like if they ever were to remake this movie, that's what they should fix. It should just be the scavenger hunt and the puzzle, and essentially the guy having laid out the breadcrumbs to help like help you get to the target. That should be the entire movie. Just remove the extraneous action sequences. Like in my view, that's how you improve that movie.
I'm not going to argue against that. Like I said, I'm happy for the way it turned out, but I would have been happy as well for if they ended up doing the film like that because the mystery, like the whole, like you said, it was that is the fun part, kind of like figuring out his own clues. And it could have led to like a showdown at the end, obviously with his friend, which could have had a bit of action scene. However, it didn't have to be like you said throughout. Like I said, even though I'm not mad at it, I do see what you're saying because there could have still been action. Like Act One, like what we saw in Act One still could have made sense if at the end where like there's a little showdown between all of them, there was a bit of fighting. But I do see how well obviously I see what you're saying because there was a lot of it. Especially in Act 3, there was a lot of it. So for some, it could be overbearing. And yeah, so I understand. So I'm not going to argue against that. And I'm not mad at that either way. I'm happy with two versions. So I would be happy with that version too. In terms of which version would be better.
Yeah.
I believe your version would be better. But it does, like I said, I'm still not mad at my version, at the version that I got. So yeah, but I still believe that your version would be better. Because that's how it was presented originally. And it was fun. So yeah.
It's really a matter of why are you here? Right? Like what was it that got you interested in the first place? And it's the clues and the puzzle are the thing, right? We don't need yet another movie about some people like in a car chase shooting guns, right? Like there has to be something else that really makes the movie stand apart and stand on its own. Right? And that and those two things can work together, and here they don't really work together. It's more like, okay, so you've enjoyed the last half hour, and now we're gonna stop that and do something you didn't sign up for. And maybe we'll come back to the thing you like in the end.
Yeah.
Why is that good storytelling? Right? So I don't think this movie kind of deserves to be lambasted quite as much as people say. But there is like this giant like albatross around its neck, or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
Why did you have to do this? I think, and it's purely movie studios thinking they know better, right? And not letting people follow a creative vision, right? Because that's not the movie John Woo wanted to make. It's not really what happens in the short story either. Like, why do this? And the answer is because conventional wisdom says this is what people expect from sci-fi movies. But then you made it more generic, you made it less interesting, and that's not why anybody signed up for it. Lots of movies have been ruined in this way, right? Any other thoughts on Paycheck?
It doesn't deserve the rating. We like what we like, if we dislike what we don't dislike. I just wonder, like, if there was something going on at the time which made people see this movie in such a light. This isn't a film, so yeah. But overall, I enjoyed it. I definitely found, like you said, I found it interesting. Now, especially after having this conversation, because like I said before, I was a bit confused about the functionality of the machine. However, now, like, actually sitting down and thinking about it while speaking to you as well, things make sense now. We discussed the plot holes. However, overall, I had a good experience with this. I want to watch, I don't know, when you watch like early 2000 films, just like films like way back in the day, it kind of makes you want to watch more films like this. Not necessarily the same storyline or same idea, but just like films in this type of era. And that's what I got after watching this movie. So, hey man, this has got a thumbs up for me. I'm giving it a solid 7 out of 10.
And this is pretty typical for like sci-fi action movies from that era. Like there's a whole bunch of these. When I was growing up, Equilibrium was the thing.
Yeah, I haven't watched that
a few
yet.
years before that, the Matrix. Like there's a whole bunch of these that are kind of in this kind of general vein and feel.
Yeah, I need to watch Equilibrium. I was close to watching it. I think I got like into the 5th minute, but then I just wasn't engaged. Not because of the film, I just was out of it. You know what I'm saying? So that's the film I need to watch.
Shall we wrap it up?
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode.
So if you liked this video, tell a friend. If you hated this, tell an enemy.
You heard it here first, guys. We will catch you next week. Au revoir.